It started like any other morning, sunlight peeking through the leaves, birds chirping across the orchard, and me sipping my coffee, proud of the work I put into this land. But just as I stepped outside, something felt wrong. Trees were missing. Branches I'd pruned for years were suddenly gone. I walked farther in, and my heart dropped. Half my orchard had been cut down, clean, deliberate, and without warning. At first, I thought it was some mistake. Maybe a landscaping crew hit the wrong lot. But then I saw her, clipboard in hand, smug look on her face, our neighborhood HOA board member, who's been on my case ever since I moved in. You might know the type. Strict about mailbox paint, grass height, and now, apparently, agricultural zones. Here's the twist. What she didn't know is that my orchard isn't just a backyard garden. It's part of a federal agriculture research project, one I've worked on for years in partnership with a government program. So yeah, what she thought was a casual enforcement of HOA aesthetics just triggered a major federal violation. And that's when everything changed. The emails, the phone calls, and eventually, federal agents showing up to investigate what happened. Stick around, because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe what came next. Let me back up a little so you understand how we even got here. I've lived on this property for about 5 years. What most people in the neighborhood see as just a few rows of trees is actually a carefully managed test orchard, part of a federal agricultural research program focused on soil health and drought-resistant crops. I've been working with a local university and a government agency, collecting data, testing growth patterns, even submitting samples every season. It's not some backyard hobby. It's legit science, funded and documented. Now, the thing about living in an HOA neighborhood is, well, it has its perks and its headaches. And ever since I moved in, this one board member, let's call her Karen to keep it simple, has had a problem with me. First, it was my mailbox color. Then, she didn't like that my trees looked messy in the fall. I always tried to play nice, responded politely to letters, showed up to meetings. But nothing seemed to satisfy her. I never thought she'd take matters into her own hands. According to neighbors, she hired a crew, without notifying me, and claimed she had authorization from the HOA to remove what she called unauthorized landscaping. But here's the kicker. No one on the HOA board approved it, not even close. And that's when the real trouble started. When I finally got a hold of the landscaping crew, they told me they were just following orders. Karen had shown them a printed-out email that looked official, said it came from the HOA board. But when I asked to see it, they said she took it with her. That was the first red flag. I called the HOA president immediately, and his voice dropped as soon as I told him what happened. We didn't authorize any removal, he said. We had no idea this was even happening. That's when I realized this was more than just a misunderstanding. Karen had gone rogue. And worse, she had no clue the orchard was federally tagged. Each tree had been marked with a small code, subtle, but scannable by the agencies I worked with. Those tags weren't just for tracking. They were part of a larger dataset tied to climate resilience research. Now, half of it was gone. Meanwhile, word started to spread through the neighborhood. Some neighbors supported Karen, claiming the orchard looked unusual and out of place for a suburban development. Others were horrified, especially the ones who remembered me planting each tree by hand and explaining my work at community events. I was stuck in the middle, facing a potential investigation, dealing with neighbors choosing sides, and trying to keep calm as federal reps asked for a full damage report. And still, Karen hadn't said a word to me. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't Karen. It was 2 men in suits, federal agriculture investigators. They'd been alerted by the university partner after I reported the destruction, and now they were here to assess the damage in person. I walked them through the rows, or what was left of them. You could see where the chainsaws had sliced clean through experimental hybrids, trees bred for specific climate resistance traits. Years of data gone. One of the agents didn't say much, just kept taking photos and scribbling notes. The other kept asking questions about who authorized the removal. I gave them everything I had: photos, timestamps, emails. I even pulled up a drone video I'd taken a few weeks earlier for documentation, showing the orchard fully intact. The contrast between that footage and the current state was shocking. Meanwhile, things in the neighborhood were getting weird. Karen stopped showing up to board meetings. Someone spotted her talking to a lawyer in her driveway. A few neighbors started quietly texting me things she'd said, claims that I was faking the research or that I'd planted the trees just to get attention. Tensions boiled over when an emergency HOA meeting was called. Word got out that the feds were involved, and suddenly everyone wanted to distance themselves from Karen. But when I walked into that meeting, I found out she had one last move planned, and it changed everything. I walked into that emergency HOA meeting expecting tension, but what I didn't expect was paperwork. Karen was already there, sitting calmly at the front, flipping through a folder like she'd been preparing for a courtroom showdown. The room was packed, neighbors whispering, a few phones recording quietly. As soon as the meeting started, she stood up and handed copies of a document to the board. "I have proof," she said, loud and clear, "but this orchard violates the neighborhood's land use agreement." I froze. She pulled out an old plat map and claimed my lot was zoned strictly for residential landscaping, no agricultural use. She even had a highlighted clause from an HOA guideline book, something about non-decorative vegetation not exceeding a certain square footage. Most people in the room didn't even know this clause existed. Honestly, neither did I. The board looked stunned. One member leaned toward me and whispered, "This wasn't in any recent bylaw updates." I knew right then she had gone digging hard for anything she could twist into her favor. But here's where it got wild. One of the federal agents had quietly joined the meeting, sitting in the back. He stood up. "I've reviewed the site and the project's federal status," he said. "And if what's in that document is used to justify what happened, we've got a bigger issue on our hands." And just like that, the room went completely silent. All eyes turned to the agent as he stepped forward. Calm but firm, he pulled out a folder of his own and laid it on the table. Inside were signed agreements, emails between the agency and my university partner, and an official letter recognizing my property as a designated satellite research site under a federal agriculture program. "This orchard," he said, tapping the papers, "is protected under federal jurisdiction. Its presence here is not only legal, it was approved years ago." Karen's face went pale. The room shifted. Neighbors who had doubted me sat back in their chairs. The HOA board started flipping through the documents with wide eyes. The president turned to Karen. "Did you know about this before ordering the removal?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, lips tight. Then came the final blow. The agent continued, "Because the removal involved destruction of federally funded agricultural research, this is now a matter under review. There may be legal and financial consequences for any individuals who acted without proper authority." You could have heard a pin drop. But just when I thought it was over, Karen blurted out, "I didn't do this alone." The board froze. And that's when we realized someone else on the HOA had helped her. Someone still sitting at that very table. Everything changed again. The room turned tense again, but this time, eyes weren't just on Karen, they were scanning the board. After a long, awkward pause, one of the members, a guy who had always stayed quiet during meetings, finally spoke. "She asked me to co-sign the landscaping request," he said. "I didn't know it was federal property. She just said it was an overgrown backyard project." It was clear now. Karen hadn't acted alone, but she had led the charge. Over the next few weeks, the HOA launched a formal investigation. Karen was removed from the board, and the co-conspirator resigned quietly before any further fallout. The federal agency issued a statement confirming the orchard's official status and started working with me on restoration. There were penalties involved, but not for me, and while the damage to the research couldn't be fully undone, they agreed to help replant and rebuild what was lost. The neighborhood cooled down. Some people apologized. A few still kept their distance. But I wasn't here for popularity, I was here for the work, for the trees, for the bigger picture. If there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that protecting something meaningful, even when others don't understand it, is worth the fight. And sometimes, the quietest spaces, like a backyard orchard, can hold the loudest stories.